Okie dokie. So I asked you to draw the reproductive structures of flower. I know we've dissected flowers. Oh, there we go. I see the anther and filament. I know it's the pollen. We get the pollen tube. Good deal. Ovary down at the bottom. Lots of dots or eggs. Right off the bat, kind of what I'm looking for. Similar structures. I can see the egg, the pollen tube. I'm assuming these are the petals, and you're working on the anther and filament. Those are on the way. There's the anther and filament. I'm lacking the pollen tube, but I'm sure you're about to draw it. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Pollen tube, ovary, filament, anther. That's pretty too. You guys are pretty good. Oh, look at that one. That's just waiting for a bee. Someone was, never mind. Let's see here. Oh, look at that one. That's a good one. Oh, look at that. Multiple eggs in that ovule. Pollen tube, anther and filament. Yay. So now you all can someday, when you're older, you can sit down with your kids and dissect the flower and actually explain to your children what all the parts are, right? What? Or what? Oh. Yeah. Well, now you can, right? You can. That's a good, it sounds weird, but when you get older, knowing those little things that seem like they should be common sense is pretty important, really, right? You're able to walk out in the woods and be like, oh, it's a megaspore, or oh, it's a microspore. We'll talk about that today on our nature walk. What? So seed plants are the most plentiful plants in the biosphere. So we're going to take a little nature walk. You guys are going to try to identify as many of these as you can. The only tough part is it's pretty dang cold out, and most flowers are not present right now, but that's okay. Now the seed coat, that's where you store food and allow an embryo to survive harsh conditions during long periods of dormancy. We live in Michigan. What does a long period of dormancy look like in Michigan? Winter, right? It's like November, December, January, and most of February. And then the heterosporous, which means there are different types of spores, where the microspores develop into drought-resistant pollen grains. And so we looked at these pollen grains developing in the flowers we dissected. Most of them weren't quite dried out yet, right? Weren't in that ready to be dispersed pollen stage. Now the megaspore will develop into an ovule, which becomes a seed following fertilization. Which one sounds bigger, micro or mega? Mega, okay? The female is generally larger. So what am I talking about? I'm definitely talking about those types of plants that produce seeds. And in Michigan, we're no stranger to conifers. In fact, our state tree is a white pine, right? And we're going to go outside and look at these momentarily. And hopefully you guys will be able to look and find the megaspores, the microspores, and talk a little bit about it. But starting off with gymnosperms, these seeds are not enclosed by fruit. There's 780 different species divided into 4 basic groups: the conifers, the cycades, the ginkgos, and the gnetophytes. We're going to look a lot at conifers today. Oh, sorry, I went on hyperspeed there. So starting with the conifers, we know they are cone-bearing. Did I go too fast? Sorry. Anybody start doing their 3D builds? A few of you? I found you don't have to build everything from scratch. You can find a lot of things online and manipulate them, so that's kind of nice. I found a water turbine. Did you guys see that?
I look at it for a little bit.
Okay. It might work. So conifers, these produce cones. These are cone-bearing plants. We're going to go outside and look at some conifers today. They have tough, needle-like leaves of pines, and they conserve water in a thick cuticle and recessed stomata. And you go, wait a minute, Mr. Mason, conifers don't have leaves. And I say, bull hooey, they do too, right? That's what needles are. They are leaves. This makes you think differently about what a leaf is. The sporophyte is dominant in this case. So you look at that giant pine tree, that is a sporophyte. So when you walk through the woods, you're walking through populations of sporophytes everywhere. And then the pollen grains are windblown. And how do I know this? Because my car is covered with this stuff, right? In the spring. You guys know that yellow stuff that just goes everywhere and is all over your car from all the pine pollen? That's what it is. It's a bunch of pine sperm all over your car. So that's what it is. So seed is the dispersal stage, and the monoecious produce both pollen and seed cones. What's up, Morgan? I do. Does he need a bunch? Well, tell him they're in the science. I've got a whole stacks in there. He knows where. Tell him I've got inside of the science storage room. There's a bunch. They're right there when you walk in. Yep. So monoecious means that they produce both pollen and seed cones. Somebody left a stop in the door. Isn't that scary when someone walks in without knocking? That scared me. I was nervous. So this is a sporophyte. I know we think of it as a tree, but just like a fern, the plant itself, this is the sporophyte, the portion of the plant that is diploid. So on this tree, you're going to have both pollen cones and seed cones. We'll talk more about this, but all of that stuff that falls on your car comes from this portion of the pine tree. Have you guys seen these before? Yeah. Okay. And we probably didn't think about that being the male portion, but that's what it is. And then here you have the seed cone, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So, of course, that pollen cone is going to contain sacs of pollen that will get released once they're mature and dried out. The ovule will develop into the megaspore, but at its first stages, it's called the megasporangium, as it develops from the sporophyte. And you guys ever look closely at a pine cone? It looks like it has scales. See how it looks kind of like a reptile a little bit? Okay, so that's called the seed cone scale. Now, the pollen cone scale is similar, but you have to look a little closer because it's smaller. It's the microsporangium. And as these continue to develop into an ovule, in this case a megaspore and a microspore, they start to take on very different structures. We're going to go outside and we're actually going to look at these. I know it's going to get super small on me now. But from that megaspore, this is what the pollen or sperm that's released is trying to find. It's trying to find its way to the megaspore so that it can go through fertilization. Once that actual sperm or pollen finds its way into the ovule in that scale and goes through fertilization, it does form a zygote, and then the beginnings of a seed start to develop. And inside of that seed, there is indeed an embryo. There's a seed coat, which gives the seed food and nutrients. My image got all screwed up. Don't worry about that, though. And so it's kind of weird when you think about that seed growing and then germinating into another mature sporophyte. But how many of you eat nuts? We all eat nuts, right? Okay. So tree nuts. Think of a tree nut. So name some tree nuts. Let's give you guys a break here. Give me some tree nuts. There's many different tree nuts. Do not say peanut. That's a plant. It's a bean, right? A legume. Isn't that weird? Like the thing we think of as the nuttiest nut is not a nut. It's a bean. It's not right, is it? But it tastes good, right? Should be a pea bean or pegoom. Pegoom. See what you guys come up with. Pistachio, almond, pecan, walnut, chestnuts, acorns, hazelnuts. It's good they don't have anybody in class called Hazel because they'd be like, call me crazy. I'm not. No. All right. So that means that when you're eating these nuts, you're basically eating an embryo of a tree. And I thought, eating eggs was bad, right? Poor. Yeah, just think about it. Just eating jars of embryos is what you're doing. When you crack open a roasted embryos at a baseball game. Oh no, sorry. Well, they still are. They're beans, right? That's not right, is it? Oh. So the uses of pine. We'll go outside and look at some pine trees, but they're obviously used in construction. They're used for parks, gardens, and Christmas decorations. Who has their pine tree? Who has their sporophyte in their living room right now? I do. I went and cut one down this last weekend. We should make up a song about sporophytes instead of Old Christmas Tree. Oh, sporophyte. Oh, sporophyte. No? Your megaspores are something. I don't know. No? All right. See what happens when you teach science for 12 years? You get really weird. See? Yeah, probably. So pine needles have an inner bark and are rich in vitamins A and C. And you can actually make tea out of the pine needles. You ever have any pine needle tea? They sell it in the store, or you can make it yourself. I've never made it myself. I've got it in little tea bags before. Yeah. Bear Grylls. I watched him do it too. Yeah. Used as a medicine. Native Americans used this when they got sick. Okay. We should go outside and collect pine needles and make tea. No? You guys could distill some water for us, and we could. Yeah. So pine oil is distilled from twigs and needles of Scotch pines and used to scent a number of household and personal care products. Everybody has seen. Oh, I got one up there. What's that hanging up on my LCD projector? Yeah, the pine tree scent, right? We've all Pine Sol, right? We've all heard of this, and it's an extract from an actual pine tree. It's actually used as an insecticide too, okay, which is not listed here. What? So is cedar, yep. So looking at cicades, there are large, finely divided leaves that grow in clusters at the top of the stem. The pollen and seed cones are on separate plants, which is different than our conifers. They're pollinated by insects rather than by wind. And they're multi-flagellated sperm, which means they have like more than one tail to swim to reach that egg. So if you think about a pine tree, do they release a lot of sperm and pollen all at one time? Yeah. So they kind of get more bang for their buck. Whereas the cicades don't release as much. They rely on insects to move their pollen from A to B. So their pollen and sperm have to have more motility or movement, so they are multi-flagellated. And then there's the ginkgo group. Who's seen the ginkgo biloba? No? Kind of? What is ginkgo biloba supposed to do? Increase your memory, right? If they sell it as a supplement, not approved by the FDA, whatever. You always say, don't forget to take your ginkgo biloba. No? If you forgot, you might have forgot to take it. You know what I'm saying? Helps here. No. So they are dioecious. Some trees produce seeds. Others produce pollen. Leaves resemble a maidenhair fern. One surviving species is the ginkgo biloba. We do have these ornamentally in Michigan, although they are not Michigan natives. Anybody seen one of these? This is a ginkgo biloba. Who's seen the ginkgo biloba tree in Michigan? They usually plant them at like universities. No? Okay. You can buy them as a supplement. Take a pill of them. But they are native in China, not in Michigan. And then there's the gnetophytes. There's 3 living genera with 70 diverse species. They have similarly structured xylem tissue. And none have an archegonia, where the strobili have a similar structure in their design. Now, the archegonia of the gnetophytes, let me see if I don't have a picture in here. Shoot. I'll find one and bring it up. There's 3 living genera with 70 diverse species, and they have similarly structured xylem. None have archegonia, and the Strombilae have similar structure. I just wrote that again. And I have that in there twice. Oh, there, I did put them in there. I thought I did. And this is what they look like here, where you have the different, they look a lot like the horsetails, but these are the actual leaves here, with the reproductive organ and the microsporangia in the middle. This is another nettophyte. We obviously do not have these in Michigan. At least I don't know. I don't think we do. I've never seen one. And so looking at how they evolved, the angiosperms, these are flowering plants and an exceptionally large and successful group of plants with 240,000 known species. And the ovules are always enclosed within diploid tissue. And they become the dominant group of plants in the late Cretaceous and early Paleocene periods. Oh, I know. I didn't mean to do that. I was hovering and clicked. So why was flowering plants? Why did flowering plants take over in the early evolution? What did that do? Think about it. Why were angiosperms so successful? Why would having this crazy accessory, like a flower that required fertilization, be so successful? I'll wait for Ryan Melks to answer and his neighbor to answer. Well, then write that. I'll wait for everybody. We'll hang out. Why were flowering plants so successful? Why is having a flower so successful? There's probably more than one reason, just so you know. Has both a male and female gametophyte, that's true, all in one location, right? They only need to be active half the year. Okay, they can be dormant, right? You can plant a seed for later. That's part of it. A lot of plants can do that. Oh, they're pretty, okay. Well, they attract other organisms to help them fertilize. That's true. They're more evolved and better adapted to their environment. So they're actually evolving with and changing with their environment. That's true. They have the ability to change because they reproduce sexually, right? They have more biodiversity, therefore. They're mixing their gene pool up all the time in constant evolution and adaptation. There was a lot of CO2 around, so all plants would have succeeded in that portion of time. They attract insects, yes. That helps spread the seeds, for sure. So they can migrate. Movement of a plant, right? Think about a plant that can now move. So again, there are many reasons. I don't know is acceptable. You only live once? Okay. Yep. Especially if you're a planter's peanut, right? Because you're going to get 8. They can reproduce more. Well, spores, you send a lot of spores out in earlier plant structures, but that's part of it. So they get help with their fertilization. So we dissected flowers already. You guys understand the flowering structure and how it's designed of both the male and female parts. You guys will be turning in your flower dissection worksheets today. So there are 2 classes of flowering plants. There are the monocotyledons, also known as monocots. Have you guys heard of monocots before, at least? No? Did you guys talk about monocots in middle school? No? It should. It should sound familiar, at least. So this is where there's one cotyledon in the seed. And then there's the eudicotyledons, and these are the eudicots, where there are two cotyledons in the seed. The eudicotyledons are also sometimes referenced to as dicots, without the "u" in front of it. In fact, in elementary school, I think I remember they called it monocots and dicots when I was a kid. What in the world? You need to take more ginkgo biloba. No? So looking at the flower, we did talk about these. You guys did a whole lab over this. The peduncle is the flower stalk, the base. And it expands at the tip into a receptacle. It bears a sepal, a petal, a stamen, and a carpel. All are attached to that receptacle in a whorl. A whorl is a point of attachment, and the name basically describes what it is, an array or an arrangement of petals. The calyx is that collection of sepals, and that protects the flower bud before it opens. Whereas the corolla is the collection of petals. And that's easy because you think of corolla, I think of like crayons, like Crayola, right? And that's colors, and the petals have colors. So just remember the corolla are the petals, and the calyx is the protective structure around that, the green structure at the base. Sometimes the calyx falls off after the flower comes out. Now, why would I need a calyx? Why would I need a calyx? And I want 100% participation. This is kind of an easy one. Just seeing if I can wake some of you up. Not that you were sleeping. But why would I need a calyx? More than for protection. Protection from what? Frosty Snowman. I told you tomorrow will be your vocab test. Your chapter test will be Thursday. Who, was someone else nailing you too? Oh. Who got yelled at? People need to stop listening to people complain. You know? No, I remember that. They said that last year. I didn't pay attention. I just kept doing what I was doing. Test falls where it falls. I don't ever really plan it. Like if we're done, we take the test. So, I mean, no comment. I see way more disruptive things than when a test is taken go on around the school. At night from the cold, yep, for sure. So flowers close up at night, right? We've all seen that. The calyx can close up sometimes in some flowers, but not all. Sometimes it opens up and the calyx is perfectly open, and then it's just the corolla that opens and closes. Yep, protect it from predators. You don't want that flower to be exposed too soon. Protection from the weather, right? Frost, like Frosty the Snowman. Jack Frost. Protects the flower bud, yep, from harsh physical forces and predators, yep. Prevents damage to the sex organs from weather, cold, yep, for sure. Ants, insects, right? Keeps other bugs out. You don't want to expose your anther and filament until it's ready to be accepted by the birds and the bees. Safe home to grow. Protection from weather, yep. It actually retains water too, right? If you open up, evaporation takes place. You get dried out. So you want to keep the right insect at the right time, for sure. Yeah, lots of good answers. Do you need me to go back? I think a few people were. So each stamen consists of an anther and a filament. So the stamen, of course, is the male sex organ. Now the carpel, which is the female sex organ, is going to contain the ovary, the style, and the stigma. The ovary is that swollen base enclosing the ovules. And it's swollen because it's full of eggs. And the ovules develop into seeds, if fertilized. And the ovary develops into fruit. Let's think about an apple. You guys aren't going to want to eat an apple after we have this discussion. So how many of you have seen apple blossoms? It's like I think it's the Michigan flower, right? It's the state flower, it's the apple blossom. So busy bee comes around and it drops some pollen off of one anther and filament into the pollen tube, the carpel of the female sex organ of another flower, and then fertilization takes place, right? And that means that the ovule starts to form a seed. Have we all ate apples? Where's the seed? It's in the core, the center area, right? And that fruit around it is actually the ovary. So you're just eating an ovary, which is really weird when you think about it, right? Like, think you think about an apple. Like, how about an avocado? There's another one, right? Big old ovule in the middle, and you're eating the ovary. I've got a million lunch jokes, but we're not going to tell any of them. All right. So, I mean, think about a chicken egg, right? It's the same thing. Okay. So the style is that elevated stigma that sticks up, and the stigma is that sticky receptor that receives the pollen grain. So on the tip of the pollen tube, there's a sticky little portion that the pollen will actually adhere to. And it wouldn't leave there unless it could do what? What can that pollen do that is very crucial to its ability to find the ovary? We have this in common with plants. No, Ryan, that's wrong. Try something else. What can that pollen do? It would be stuck on the end. Okay? It falls on the stigma, and it would be stuck there unless it could do what? I like move. Yeah, they're flagellated, right? Yeah. What? Yeah. So, now I will tell you, they all aren't, but many are. Okay? If they are not, then there are other motility methods, like the fluid is less viscous, so it can flow down with water and be washed in. But a lot of them are flagellated or multiflagellated, which makes you think about pollen in a whole other way. Anybody ever eat wheat germ? Yeah? Wheat germ is just the early gametes of wheat, right? You're just eating those early. You're basically eating a bunch of pollen. Yeah, I didn't say that, but I was avoiding that, but yes. Yes. Yeah. So here we have a monocot, and here we have a dicotyledon. Now, you would really have to dissect these to get into it and really figure this out, but we'll take a walk. We aren't going to be able to see flowers today, which is kind of a bummer. I really wish this unit was more in the spring, but even flowers wouldn't be out by the time we took the AP exam. So, what? Something to do after the AP exam is indeed to take a nature walk and identify monocots and dicots, tear apart the neighbor's flower bed. Right? Okay, so we've dissected flowers. We kind of jumped ahead with our dissection. Usually the dissection goes after this set of notes, but the flowers came in. It was before Thanksgiving. It was a good time to do it. So, of course, we have the anther and filament. The anther is going to contain the pollen. Here's the female sex organ, stigma on top where the pollen sticks to, and the pollen tube where the pollen or sperm travels down the length of the pollen tube called the style. Once it gets past the style, it enters the ovary where hopefully it finds the ovule and fertilizes it, creating a seed. And then the ovary is sort of like the food for the seed, or sometimes it acts as a enticer to get, let's say, a deer or a horse to eat you and then poop you out somewhere else, right? Think about it. I've got apple trees all over my property, and my horses eat them, and every now and then I get little apple trees, like seedlings, poking up over on the corners of where they poop, because they literally move it and fertilize it in a different spot, right? That's what they're doing. Now, we don't eat the seeds, but if we did, we would do the same thing. Although I don't think they would make it through the sewage treatment plant. Right? So I understand that the flowering life cycle is way more complicated than most of the other cycles, and that's because it creates more diversity. It's more eclectic. It involves other organisms generally. Okay? It doesn't have to, though. So we talked about the process of fertilization. Once that occurs at fertilization, we've already gone to this point here, you end up being diploid after this stage. And so you spend half your life in each stage almost as far as your life cycle goes. And so generally, plants are referred to as alternating between generations of haploid and diploid. And when we take a walk outside, we're going to look for, hopefully, some different structures like of our sporophytes. So here you can see even a peach. Of course, the inside is that fertilized ovule, and the ovary surrounding it is what you, or the palm is what you actually eat. Okay? And we've already dissected a flower, so we aren't going to get into that. So flowers and diversification. The wind-pollinated flowers are usually not showy. Pine trees. You ever see like some pretty corollas on a pine tree? You never walk up to a pine tree and look at the petals on that thing. You know, it's a bunch of pine needles, right? Because they aren't attracting what? What does that pine tree not have to attract? What does a pine tree not worry about that a tulip does? Birds and the bees, right? The pollinators. Yeah. Because pine trees use wind, they don't worry about whether or not they're all flashy and attracting an ant or a bumblebee or what. It doesn't. They don't care. They don't care if a bumblebee comes by and says hello. Okay. They just do their thing when the wind blows. Same thing with cottonwood. You guys ever see the cottonwood trees blow all that stuff off? Yep. Or the popple trees. Okay. Anybody allergic to that stuff? Ooh, it gets me. Right? Even the pine pollen gets me good. So bird-pollinated and insect-pollinated flowers are often colorful. So if you see something colorful, it's colorful for a reason. Usually adaptations do not exist because they lack function. Usually they exist because they serve a function for the plant. Night-blooming flowers attract nocturnal mammals or insects, and usually white or cream-colored and aromatic. Now, this is going to lead into the whole discussion about the smell of spring. So, anybody ever like walk outside as you transition between day and night in the springtime, and even into the summer, early summer? Anybody notice a smell? You might not even be able to be like identify it, but you notice a difference when you walk outside and you go, smells like a summer night or early spring night. It does, because literally what's happening is plants are opening up and releasing endorphins and oils to attract their pollinators. There are beetles, there are ants. Ants are nocturnal. There's beetles, most beetles are nocturnal, and they're crawling around, they're looking for the flower that's smelling and releasing these oils and aromatics. And that's how they attract their pollinators, because at night, obviously, they can't see. So the fruits of flowers protect and aid in seed dispersal. They utilize wind, gravity, water, and animals for dispersal. We talked about horses and apples. What are some other ways? Think about some other modes of fertilization where fruits come into play. I want you to list the plant and the animal. Everybody's going to come up with one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 21 of you will give me an example. I don't care what. I think a Chippendale. Little chipmunks. Chipmunks, little holy squirrels running around. Did you get my joke? No? Gregor Mendel's favorite rodents, chipmunks, because he's a monk. Come on, 5 of you. I'm waiting for everybody. And I'll find out who you are, too. I'll look for you. So Adam says, apples and humans. That works. I've never pooped in the woods, but, well, that's a lie. That's gross, too. Is grapes and bees. Okay, yep, they pollinate it. I was thinking about moving it. Heck, a lot, like birds and grapes. You ever see blackbirds eat grapes? We got to shoot them a lot of times. You got to get a special permit to do that. Don't go doing that on your own. What? Oh, we got another one? Brian says hummingbirds and honeysuckles for sure. Anybody ever ate a honeysuckle? They aren't as sweet as what you'd think. They're a little sweet, but not very. Acorns and squirrels, yep. You ever see a squirrel? You know that I learned something. I listened to this long study they did on squirrels on NPR one morning. Squirrels actually forget where they bury their nuts. And they always are stealing their neighbor's nuts. And so they're like these thieves, but they all do it together, so it's okay, and they always have nuts that way. But they can only remember, they found out, like 12 locations of their nuts. So that means the other ones they're just finding and stealing, so sometimes they're stealing from themselves and then reburying it somewhere else. Maybe I'm the only one that finds that funny. But anyway, so if they forget about it, then it gets planted. That's what I was trying to get at, right? So if they forget about where they put their nuts, then it could be an oak tree next year, right? Pooping cane. You're supposed to have an animal in there. Everybody, just say all animals poop, Mr. Mason. Squirrels and walnut trees, yep. Okay. Person who, yeah, like they prune them and pull it, yeah. Bees in the flowers, bananas and monkeys. I guess so, yeah. Never thought of that one. I don't know. I got to look into the banana because I forget. Well, there's seeds in the side of them, but and then the outside's the ovary, and then there's lots of little seeds in there. But gosh, now I want to look into what happens when a banana dries out and turns into gets planted. Water, yep, water moves them for sure. Chipmunks and nuts, apples, seeds, squirrels, corn, no response. Apples, oh, who didn't have a response? Oh, but you gave me one up here, didn't you? Yeah. Wonder why I had you in there twice. Algae, fish. Okay. Kind of. That's not a plant. Bats and fruit, yep. Fruit bats, right? Think about that. Okay. Deer and apples, throwing oranges at your neighbors. Of course, Ryan had the nonsense answer. Yeah, okay. You have an orange tree in your backyard? Okay. So you have a blueberry tree?
Oh, no, we have a couple of blueberries. I don't know if they're bushes or trees.
You have a bush, not a tree. Okay. All right. A blueberry. I like that one because it's in the. Yeah. All right. What? What? That was funny. All right, guys. All right. I understand. Plants aren't the